Hi, and welcome to the Open Mind Show. I have a very, very special guest today, Barbara Lamb. Barbara Lamb is the most fascinating woman I have ever met in my life. She is a UFO researcher and experiencer and crop circle expert, and she knows just almost everybody who is anybody in that business, and she's had some extraordinarily unusual experiences, and she's helped so many people understand theirs. So I'll just shut up now and let you talk with Barbara or listen to Barbara herself. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Anita.
Oh, I'm so glad you came. I know your schedule is so busy. I've been wanting to get you on for the longest time.
Yes.
But either you're off in Europe somewhere, or you're doing a symposium somewhere else, or
That's
you
right.
just have a
It's
lot
a very
on your
busy,
mind.
very interesting life. I feel blessed.
Well, great. And then
Yeah.
people who know you feel blessed to know you too.
Thank
'Cause
you.
I know a lot of people you've helped, including me.
That's true. We've worked together.
Yeah. So I want to start kind of like at the beginning here.
Okay.
Like, tell me, how did you get where you are? I mean, like, what was your first experience? I mean, what made you decide to investigate this and become involved in this world?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I grew up on the East Coast, a nice conservative environment, and I went to an Ivy League women's college, Mount Holyoke College, and these kinds of things, extraterrestrial encounters, well, I mean, it was never thought of that I knew about.
Imagine that.
Certainly never spoken about, not taught about.
Yeah.
So I grew up and went through my early adult years, till my middle adult years actually, just without a clue that things of this unusual nature, that is extraterrestrial encounters with human beings, would happen, did happen, could possibly happen. It just wasn't in my frame of reference whatsoever. But in 1976, I became a licensed psychotherapist and did regular psychotherapy with regular people, and all very, what we would call normal, understandable human concerns. And then in 1984, I began to get training as a past life regression therapist.
So how did you come to a belief in reincarnation?
Well, I started to
That doesn't
believe,
quite fit Ivy League college.
No, that's right. No, it doesn't. I became involved in wanting to know about past life regression therapy because in the early 1980s, I was traveling to various countries, particularly at that time, Egypt and Peru. And in those countries, to my enormous surprise, in certain locations there, I would notice that a very powerful memory, or it certainly seemed like a memory, would just sort of come roaring up from
I know that feeling. I had the
underneath.
same one, or more than one, but yeah, the same
Yes,
kind
and
of experience.
that I was in a place and suddenly I remembered being there, very clearly being there, but yet being a different person.
Yeah.
And
Well, that
I
must
could
have
even
knocked your
been-
socks off.
It did knock my socks off, and especially when some of these things would happen, I'd experience that I was a male, or that I had been a male some other time, but in that location. And so many details came up with these memories. I later came to call them spontaneous past life recalls. But at the time these were happening, I didn't know about past lives.
So what did you
And
think was happening to
So,
you?
well, I just thought, oh my goodness, this seems so real, so impactful, and so much emotion with it, that I think somehow it must have happened. So then, what does that mean? Does that mean we've had previous lifetimes that we haven't been conscious of? So I began to pay attention to that. And after another year or so, already being a licensed therapist, I found myself wondering more and more, could past lives and remembering past lives somehow be used therapeutically for people? And I lived with that thought for a year or so.
Oh, long
and
time.
Then, yeah. And then one day, out of the blue, I just went into our family room, turned on the television at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which I never had done before or since. Something, in other words, guided me to do that. And I thought, this is strange. Why am I turning on the television? I never do this. But right there on the screen, on the television, was a film of Helen Wambaugh, PhD, who had done and was still doing a lot of research on past lives.
Yeah, I remember.
Reincarnation.
I remember her work, yes.
Yeah, this was about 1983. So I watched her hypnotically regress a whole group of people who were at a workshop with her, and they were lying on mats or blankets on the floor. Looked a little bit odd, but then I had done plenty of experiences, guided plenty of experiences where people would relax on the floor previous to that. So I watched and I noticed that she was guiding them into any one of several time periods that she mentioned, and whichever one they sort of resonated with, that's the one that they would sort of pay attention to.
Oh, that's a good technique.
In other words, yes, it was, that they might settle, for the year 1100, for instance, or 650, or 100 AD, etc. And then I noticed that when people would sort of come back up out of the regression, she'd immediately have them write down all kinds of details on a piece of paper that she had previously given them. And so she was collecting data about how much people remembered from these different time periods. And so again, I thought, well, she's doing this for research, and she's going to write a book about it. But maybe I could use it therapeutically. And then, exactly 1 year later, 1984, I serendipitously met Hazel Denning.
Oh, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful
Parapsychology
woman.
Association of Riverside.
She was, Parapsychology Association. And she had also, a couple of years earlier, founded the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies in Riverside, California.
Yes.
That was only about 45 minutes from where I live, so how perfect. And she knew I was a therapist. She knew I had done a lot of the deeper work. And so she encouraged me to come to their conference, which was going to happen the very next day. All of this was so synchronistic, so perfect, as if orchestrated by guides or whomever, maybe my higher wisdom, hard to tell. And so I went to the conference, and I was so impressed with the other licensed therapists, and many of them were hypnotherapists as well, and they were doing this past life regression therapy work. I was tremendously impressed with the quality of these professionals and the material, the professional work that they were doing, and the help that it was giving to people. So they then encouraged me to begin my own training, because I was obviously showing great interest. And that training started about 2 weeks later. I mean, everything just fell in so perfectly. And I went to the training, which was a week long in Southern California, and thought, oh, this is wonderful. I feel like I've come home. I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
So you were following your bliss.
I was following my bliss, as dear Joseph Campbell said. I had a weekend sitting right next to him one time.
Oh, God, I'm so
just
envious.
A marvelous
I adore
experience. Me too. And so I went for about 5 different modules of training, and was, during those few years, doing a considerable amount of past life regression therapy in my practice, and always finding that it was so helpful for the people who were having these regressions. It was a very valid, wonderful part of therapy, and a very fascinating part of therapy. Now, in my 5th module of training, which I believe was about 1988, it was the most advanced level of training I could take, the most advanced level they gave. The trainer, who was a wonderful therapist from Camarillo, California, said at the beginning of that training, said very casually, those of you students, those of you who are doing this past life regression therapy work, could possibly find that sometimes someone will come to you who seems to need your help, who seems to be traumatized by very unusual beings. We tend to think of them as alien beings coming from somewhere else in the cosmos, coming to them, taking them away for a short period of time, bringing them back. And the whole experience is so baffling and confusing and sometimes terrifying for them. And they might want help with this. Well, I was stunned. I mean, I had never heard of other beings from elsewhere coming and taking people away. But even more startling than that, that as soon as she finished that sentence, there was in my head a big booming voice that was sort of yelling to me. Nobody else heard it, but I did. And that voice, it was as if pointing to me and saying, "Pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this." And pointing, I mean, it's like pointing a finger right at me. So my goodness, I mean, here I was
all right.
hearing about extraterrestrials coming and taking people away for periods of time. And then this voice, for wherever that came from, I don't know. I've always called it the big voice of my soul.
Whatever.
But anyway, it was there.
If it wants you to pay attention, it'll let you know.
And I did pay attention, yes. And then, you see, I didn't know about extraterrestrials or even UFOs at that time, around 1988. So I started going to whatever lecture or listen to any program or even radio program or anything I could find about the whole UFO phenomenon, and particularly about experiences with these other beings. And I needed
But you hadn't had any recall of any yourself.
No, I had no recall of anything like that for myself. And I thought I was completely separated from anything like that. However, I had, by that time, by 1988, I'd had 3 different clients who had done regression with me for completely human concerns, nothing to do with extraterrestrials. But in those regressions with 3 people, to my surprise and to their surprise, they found that they had been extraterrestrials themselves in a previous lifetime.
Another step.
And they sometimes were on another planet and then reincarnated into Earth as a human. In a couple of cases, they were visiting extraterrestrials, sort of checking out things on planet Earth. And for, well, one of them actually got stuck here. The vehicle that came in crashed, and they were actually stuck here on Earth and died here. And in another case, the person came out to do some investigating about Earth, but then got back into the craft with their comrades and flew away. Now, that was a great surprise to these clients and a huge surprise to me. So I had a little bit of inkling that, maybe something like this really does go on. So I went to these lectures and found out a lot of evidence about the UFO phenomenon really being real, and heard various depictions of encounters that certain people were having with these visiting extraterrestrial beings. And then in 1991, feeling like, if anybody ever comes to me about that type of thing, I think I could handle it.
Good.
One day, I thought, I think I could handle it.
And you have ever since.
And the very next day, a woman called and said, my daughter is having very unusual experiences. She's 21 years old, and she's being terrified, traumatized, because these very unusual beings sometimes are coming to her in her room at night. And she's so traumatized that she stays up as late every night as she possibly can, till at least 4 o'clock in the morning. and then she somehow feels safe enough, for whatever reason, to go to sleep.
ETs don't come before 4 or after 4 o'clock in
For,
the morning?
for this particular
Yeah.
person, her ETs seemed to come around 4 o'clock in the morning.
Isn't that interesting?
Consistently. But she was terribly baffled and frightened, and she had been a college student and dropped out of college, and she dropped out of her part-time job and was insisting on sleeping between her mother and father in their bed for a feeling of safety. Although, as it turned out, we found out she was abducted from their bed anyway.
Yeah,
With them
from
being,
what I know, if they want you, they got you.
That's right. And it doesn't matter whom you're with or where
Yeah.
you are. And so what they do in a case like that, if the person they're working with is accompanied by somebody else, they switch off or made sort of out of it, sort of unconscious, those other people.
Yeah,
So they're not aware
right.
of this
That's
encounter
happened
happening.
to me when I've been had encounters.
Yes, somebody with you, and that
Just
person is totally
completely
switched
out,
off and
yeah.
not aware. So she came 6 times, 6 different regression sessions in a period of about maybe a month or a month and a half or 2 months. And on the last time that she came in to see me, she looked unstressed, she looked relaxed, she was smiling.
Oh, that's
she
wonderful.
looked wonderful.
Yeah.
And she said, I am so pleased to tell you that I have figured out that I am privileged, I am honored
Wow.
to be chosen by these beings, and that what they seem to be doing with me, I know is at least very, very important to them.
What
One
a
of
wonderful
those things,
attitude.
great attitude, and so entirely different
Yeah.
than her attitude when she first started coming in for regressions about this. And she said, not only am I privileged and feel very blessed to be having these experiences, but I feel like I've been healed by some of these beings. And then she went on to tell the story of how just a week or so before, she and her sister had been driving in a car in Southern California, and they noticed a bright blue beam of light coming through the front windshield and then through the side of the car and
Oh, yeah.
then through the back window. And as this was happening, she noticed that the car motor was starting to sort of get dim and sluggish and peter out.
Or their mailboxes shaking,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in the movies.
Oh, yeah. And this was at dusk. It wasn't fully
Yeah.
dark, but she could still, and her sister too, could still see this bright beam of light. So they pulled the car off the road because the motor was coming to a stop, jumped out of the car, not knowing what this bright royal blue beam of light was, and started running across the field that happened to be right next to their car. And as they ran across the field, this blue beam of light seemed to follow them, particularly they followed her, my client. And the blue beam of light seemed to settle itself or focus itself on the lower back area of her body. And it felt good. Now, she had had, for a few years, a lower back pain problem.
Really?
And so it was as if this beam of light was conscious and knew that. And as the beam of light was sort of penetrating her lower back as she was running, she began to feel better and better and better and less pain. And she finally just sort of stopped
I was
and
gonna say I would stop running.
gave up to it, gave into it. And then she felt like she was completely healed.
Right.
And a week or so later, when she came in to me, she said, I've had no pain whatsoever since that blue beam hit my back.
Yeah.
Now, very importantly, her sister subsequently came in to see me for totally other reasons. She was not having contact with these beings, but she did see that beam of light. She was right there to witness it. And so that was wonderful to have corroboration
Yeah.
from somebody else. Now, after this person finished working with me in the spring of 1991, I was thinking, oh, wow. I mean, not only can I work with this, but it certainly was extremely helpful for this young woman. So if anybody else, I just sort of said out loud in my home, nobody listening, supposedly, I just said, if anybody else wants to come, that's just fine. I would be very interested in helping them with that.
And they haven't stopped.
And then, yeah, it was about 2 months later,
Yeah.
another woman came, and she had, probably 50 or 60 regressions with me about extraterrestrial
Wow.
experiences over a period of about 10 years. And then, soon after that woman started coming, for some reason, I don't know how it happens, but other people began to hear that I did this work. I was not advertising it. I didn't have flyers or posters up or anything, but just as life
Word got around.
synchronicity has it,
Yeah.
other people came. So by now, I have regressed 680 individuals to these extraterrestrial
Oh my
encounters.
goodness.
And
Yeah.
because many of them live within an hour or so of where I'm located, many of them have come quite a number of times. So this one woman I mentioned had probably had at least 50, maybe even 60 regressions. And some other people had 40 regressions.
Wow.
Another woman had 30, another had 20, a man had about 18. I do this with men too, not just women, because men do experience these encounters as well.
Sure.
And some of them maybe had 2 or 3 regressions. And many have had one, because when I go to a conference every year, like the UFO Congress, International UFO Congress, there are people there who hear me speak about this, and I run a large experiencer support group, usually 5 nights out of the week-long conference. And so there may be 40 or 50 or 60 people in that group, and a lot of them want regressions. So
Yeah.
I always give maybe 10, 12, this past year was 18 regressions while I was there. And in many cases, I do not ever see those people again.
Yeah.
But sometimes they'll email me and tell me about subsequent experiences, or tell me how they're doing. And you know, usually it's been very, very helpful that they've had the regressions.
I'm curious about